Today is January 11th, 2020, and here we are in Death Valley. It's our first trip of 2020. I visited Death Valley 2 months ago and have wanted to go back and see some of the places I missed. My wife suggested we squeeze in a few days at the park before she starts her last semester of nursing school later this month. She hasn't been to Death Valley and wanted to see it also. My plan is to do more narrating this year, but it will have to wait until the next episode. I was sick at the beginning of this trip and didn't have much of a voice. Since I was sick, we got a late start and arrived in Death Valley with enough daylight left to pick out a campsite. We decided to eat at the newly renovated Last Kind Words Saloon and Steakhouse located at the historic ranch at Death Valley. After dinner, we made our way to the Texas Springs Campground. We needed a good night's sleep because of an early morning hike in Golden Canyon the next morning.
Mining companies that were here, like the Pacific Coast Borax Company, they thought, prospectors said, oh, look, we found all this borax, which they called white gold. And then it didn't pan out, I guess literally, gold. And so they had built this railroad down south, and they were all invested here, and they needed to make a profit. So what they did was think, how else can we profit from this area? Well, let's make people come here for the extremes of the desert. So they said, bring your Dodge Brothers Jeep, go through the most extreme environment around. And this is an advertisement from a mining company nearby, a mining town, parodying all the advertisements that were also going around. We're walking through an old fan here, and a lot of it's called, this jumble of rocks all cemented together is called fanglomerate, coming from conglomerate. How would you describe how tilted things are right here? Maybe like a, what? Very. Awfully. So this used to be horizontal, and then things were tilted over a long period of time. So this is a basin and range province of a pattern across the western U.S. So Badwater Basin is the low point, and then this is the Black Mountains, part of a range here of the Amargosa Range. And it's experienced crustal stretch and elongation. And as the Earth's crust stretches, here's the Black Mountains where we are on this side. As the Earth's crust stretches, the basins lower and the ranges rise. So that's what's currently happening. The Black Mountains where we are rising, and Badwater Basin is lowering ever so slightly. They came here in the gold rush of 1849. And it was a terrible adventure, crucible, where people didn't have a map. They wanted to take shortcuts through the mountains, and they got stuck here in Death Valley. And that's how it got its name. They burned their wagons for fuel and ate their cattle and had to be rescued by people going out to towns and coming back, and people perished, and then on the way out, one lady looked back from the mountaintop and said, "Goodbye, Death Valley," and that's how it was named.
But there's people there?
Huh.
Yeah, it looks sad.
It looks sad.
Water is rare and precious in Death Valley. Imagine the disappointment when a surveyor mapping this area could not get his mule to drink from this pool. He wrote on his map that the spring had bad water, and the name stuck. Ancient water fills this pool year-round. Much of it began as ice-age snow and rain hundreds of miles away in the mountains of central Nevada. The runoff seeped into porous limestone bedrock and began a long underground flow through a regional aquifer. It emerges here at Badwater along the fault line at the base of the mountain. Salts dissolve from old deposits and flow to the surface, making the spring water bad. So this is just a taste of what the road to the racetrack would be like, only worse, for 26 miles.
I don't feel like I want to be doing that right now.
Get the rest.
Alright, I'm ready for bed.
It's our second night together in the new rooftop tent.
And we have the buddy heater on, which is quite warm.
The heater's a little bit too big for this tent. We could only have it on for a short time and then it gets really hot in here. The next morning we journeyed 22 miles from Furnace Creek to the site of Bennett's Long Camp on the West Side Road. In the fall of 1849, a group of pioneers left Salt Lake City for the goldfields of California. The disaster that befell the Donner Party a couple of years before were still fresh on everyone's mind. So instead of attempting to cross the Sierra Nevada mountains in winter, they intended to follow the old Spanish Trail, which went around the south end of the Sierra Nevada mountains. On Christmas Eve of 1849, some of them arrived at Travertine Springs, the source of Furnace Creek, in what is now known as Death Valley. Their oxen were weak from lack of forage, and their wagons were battered and in poor shape. They too were weary and discouraged, but their worst problem was not the valley that lay before them. It was the towering Panamint Mountains that stood like an impenetrable wall as far as one could see. From Furnace Creek, the pioneers struggled across the salt flats and attempted to pass over the Panamint Range via Warm Springs Canyon, but were unable to do so. They retreated to the valley floor and sent two young men, William Lewis Manley and John Rogers, over the mountain to get supplies. Nearly a month went by as the men walked more than 300 miles to Mission San Fernando, got supplies at a ranch, and trekked back. When Manley and Rogers finally arrived to the camp of the Bennett Arcan party, they found many of the group had left to find their own way out of the valley. The two families with children had patiently remained, trusting the men to save them. Only one man had perished during their long wait, but as they made their way west over the mountains, someone is said to have proclaimed, "Goodbye, Death Valley," giving the valley its morbid name. I think we're here. Near this spot, the Bennett Arcane contingent of the Death Valley 49ers, immigrants from the Middle West seeking a shortcut to California goldfields, were stranded for a month and almost perished from starvation. William Lewis Manley and John Rogers, young members of the party, made a heroic journey on foot to San Fernando and, returning with supplies, led the party to the safety of the San Francisquito Rancho near Newhall. We passed the grave of Shorty Harris, dean of all desert prospectors, who died at the age of 74 in a cabin at Big Pine. He requested to be buried at the bottom of Death Valley beside his partner, who he had prospected with many years ago in search for the yellow metal. While the sun sank slowly into the purple haze that filters over Death Valley at twilight, and taps sounded in the clear air of this mysterious land he knew so well, Shorty Harris, miner, good Samaritan, and friend to all who knew him, was laid to rest in a dusty grave on the valley floor. D-A-Y-T-O-N. He was laid beside the grave of his old pal and friend, Jim Dayton, a respected pioneer prospector of the Death Valley region. Borates are salt minerals and were deposited in ancient lake beds that uplifted and eroded into the yellow Furnace Creek Badlands. Water dissolved the borates and carried them to the Death Valley floor, where they recrystallized as borax. It's been used by blacksmiths, potters, dairy farmers, housewives, meat packers, and even morticians. For centuries, humans have exploited borax for many important uses. San Francisco businessman William T. Coleman built this plant in 1882 to refine the cotton ball borax found on the nearby salt flats. The high cost of transportation made it necessary to refine the borax here rather than carry both borax and waste to the railroad 165 miles across the desert. The mule teams pulled loads weighing up to 36 tons, including 1,200 gallons of drinking water. The rear wagon wheels were 7 feet high, and the entire unit with mules was more than 100 feet long. For more than a century, the 20-mule team has been the symbol of the borax industry, on product labels, in history books, and on television. The status is well earned. Mule teams help solve the most difficult task that faced Death Valley borax operators: getting the product to market. Old Dinah, 1894. Steam tractor and ore wagons introduced at Old Borate to replace the 20-mule teams and replaced in turn by the Borate and Daggett Railroad. The tractor was later used and abandoned on the Keane Wonder Mine Road in Death Valley. We're driving an hour from Furnace Creek to the Mesquite Springs Campground, which will put us closer to tomorrow's adventure, the Ubehebe Crater. Sun's gone now anyway.
Well, pick a different site.
That sun left in a hurry. Do you want to do 36 or do you want to do this backside?
36 works. We just passed it.
I know. I'm kind of feeling.
Well, then pick your site. Can we do this one right here?
Sure.
Because then that's just right across the way. Is it taken?
34.
Okay.
Nope. Oh wow, it is.
Yeah, it's nice.
It is a nice view. Blanket?
Um,
Your sleeping bag? My quilt.
You're so lucky I was a catcher in my previous life.
It's almost like spaghetti. Hit the spot.
Howdy. I'm the old ranger, and Death Valley's my stamping ground. Many's the tale of adventure I'm going to tell you about the Death Valley country. True stories, mind you. I can vouch for that. This old place don't look like much now, but back in 1882, it was more important than a gold mine. And the man that made it important was a young fella by the name of Aaron Winters.
The next morning, we traveled 5 miles from our campsite to the Ubehebe Crater. At least that's what I call it. It's actually pronounced Ubehebe. It's vivid evidence of one of the geologic forces that shaped Death Valley. Unlike most geologic features, the age of Ubehebe Crater is measured in thousands rather than millions of years. It's about 2,000 years old. Recipe for explosion. Rising magma, hot molten rock, turns groundwater to steam. Intense steam pressure builds until the superheated combination of steam and rock explodes, creating a crater like this one. The explosion spewed shattered rock over a 6 square mile area, in some places to depths of 150 feet. Ubehebe is the largest of many explosion craters in the area. Ubehebe Crater is a half-mile across and about 500 feet deep. We made a quick stop at the ranch at Death Valley for souvenirs and one of my many must-haves, a pressed penny. I was hoping to get answers to some nagging questions at the museum next door, but that didn't happen. It seems people only know the basic history of the area. Our next stop was King of the Desert. Good fortune inspired the name King of the Desert, coined for the Keane Wonder Mine by the Rhyolite Herald in 1911. The mine was discovered by Jack Keane and his partner in 1904. Producing over $1 million in gold from 1904 to 1917, the mine shared the distinction of being profitable with the mines in Skidoo and Rhyolite. Gold from the Keane Wonder Mine returned as coins to pay its employees. Wanting to capitalize on their good fortune, Keane and his partner sold their interest in the mine in 1907. Subsequent owners developed a 20-stamp processing mill, housing, an ice plant, and a spectacular mile-long tramway. The advantage to moving the ore down the mountain by tram and to tunnel horizontally into the mountain rather than sinking shafts allowed the mine to operate with a good profit margin. Unlike most Death Valley mines, the Keane Wonder Mine lived up to the name King of the Desert. I'm looking for gold. There's got to be some left over. Found gold. This is just like the one in the gift shop, except you don't have to dig for that one. Death Valley Gold.